Hi, everyone. So wonderful to see you here and to spend time with you. My name is Katerina Stoikova. I am the founder and senior editor of Accents Publishing. We are an independent press in Lexington, Kentucky. Every other week, more or less, on a Wednesday for 1 hour, we plan to bring you an author of a book published by Accents Publishing and to focus on that author and that book. We launched the series in September with Lita Kendrick and her book and Lakir. After that, we followed with Sonia DeVries and her anthology, The Junkie Who Loved Horses. And it's an anthology of poetry written by formerly incarcerated men. So a few events coming up. On November 18, we will feature Frank X. Walker and his book, Masked Man Black. It just came out. And on December 2nd, our featured author is Eric Scott Sutherland with his instant classic, Earth is My Church. And I believe he's here. Hi, Eric. And then on one more event by the end of the year, and that is a lot of us. That is the contributors of Literary Accents Literary Journal, and we'll just everybody will read the poem that he or she has contributed, and then we will I don't know, we'll celebrate and we'll talk about the future of the journal. The events that have passed have recordings, and I have posted in the chat section the link to the YouTube channel of Accents, and you can see there the recordings. So, and now back to Chris and his book. Accents Publishing is proud to bring to you Christopher McCurry's first full-length poetry collection, Open Burning. Reality and dreams mesh in open burning, detailing the fallout of a young couple's divorce. Through the magic of these well-crafted poems, we become invested in the seemingly inconsequential as well as the life-changing. This is the book in hardcover, and yesterday it arrived in paperback. Very exciting. I love this book, and I have prepared a list of top 6 things that I love about Chris's poetry. One, in no particular order, but the order that I wrote them down. One is memorable. You know, if I have to describe the book with one word, I would say it's unforgettable. This will be a book remembered and talked about. 2, it's moving. If a poem is well made, that doesn't mean it's interesting. And I am emotionally engaged with every one of these poems. They are not only well made, they are also interesting. It's relatable. One reason I cannot stop reading this book is that I have been all these characters, so I can relate to every one of the characters in the book. It's raw. If you don't understand my accent, R-A-W, raw. Raw, not as in not finished, but as in not overdone. What needs to be exposed has been exposed. It's consistent, which means all the poems are of high quality. Chris worked and worked until he could fill the book with only really strong poems. I know it took him a number of years to finish this book. You can ask him about that in the Q&A section. And the next one, number 6, is that the book is alive. It has its own energy, makes your heart beat faster, and every time I've read it in one sitting. So yes, this book is very much alive. Chris is one of the most exciting up-and-coming young authors. And Chris, I cannot wait to read what you're going to write next. Please help me welcome the star of the night, Christopher McCurry.
Thank you all. Well, I love lists, and I love all the things you said about the book. I'm so glad to hear that from you, because I'm one of your biggest fans and I love your work. So it always makes me feel like a lot of dollars when you talk about my work like that. So thank you all for coming and listening to poetry tonight and coming to a book club. I'm going to read some from Open Burning, and since it's close to Halloween, I thought I would read all the poems that are the dream poems and that are a little weird and a little spooky and a little, I don't know how to describe them all, but I'm going to probably read, like, I think there's 9 or so of them, and I'm going to start with a quote from the beginning of the book, and we'll just go from there, and then hopefully we're talking to each other before too long here. So the quote is, "Talking about dreams is like talking about movies, since the cinema uses the language of dreams. Years can pass in a second, and you can hop from one place to another. It's a language made of image. And in the real cinema, every object and every light means something, as in a dream." And that's Federico Fellini's quote, the director. So I'll do a little backstory. I stopped dreaming after my daughter was born for 4 years. And then on her 4th birthday, they started coming back. And then a year later, her mom and I got divorced, and they got a whole lot weirder after that, the dreams. And they also got highly cinematic. So I'll start with the very first poem of the book, "The Epoch of Nothing Beyond Her. When she was born, my mind went dark. I no longer dreamt my death. I craved my unanchored core. There was no end to the exhaustion, knowing my teeth were always my teeth, never reabsorbed to gnaw on the hawk's heart at the end of the rope in my chest. 4 years later, on her birthday, the dreams return. I'm locked in a cell, and an eye of gray watches me. In the black of the pupil, there's a man with my teeth eating from the palms of his hands." That's a little spooky, right? A little Halloween-y? I don't know, maybe. So the way I started to think about these dreams is they had like genres of film that they were following, and they fit into while I was dreaming them. So I just tried to label them the genre that I felt they were closest to as their titles. So this is Silent Urban Fringe Noir. Nameless dark-haired boy works nights on the edge of the city in the last place in town where you can buy books from the rack. The only light is neon. A group of teens come in, loud and out of place. They knock a stand of comics to the ground. She helps him pick them up. He thinks her body is like a dolphin's. They stand next to each other, staring at the shit job they made of their lives and this rack of comics. He goes home with her to her house that's several small houses tucked inside one another. The group of friends is already there and drunk or high, and the two of them sit close to each other, and the camera cuts to them wrapping their skin in black cloth bodysuits with mesh over her breasts and ass, and on his a rubber sling for his dick, the head of which is a pink-faced bear, smiling with round ears. The film cuts again to rubbing, the bear's head bouncing, and then they are running through the house, within the houses, and we are to understand that they are in love with who they want to be, but can't. Cut again, they are in her parents' closet, sitting underneath the suits her father wears to work, hiding behind his shoes as he gets ready for work. They sleep there all day. Cut to the back seat of a taxi cab where the boy is riding alone. In his mind, she arches her body, and her smooth stomach rises to his mouth. That's a pretty weird one, but they're also just, I tried to just write them exactly as they occurred in my dreams. So this is a pretty intimate look at someone's brain that when it's untethered from reality and also experience some amount of trauma. This one's called Nostalgic American Period Drama with Korean Othering. The problem is easy to identify, but impossible to overcome. We've agreed to buy 4 houses and can't afford them. There's a matchbox, thin-walled house just like the one you grew up in, but not the exact one. It doesn't smell enough like bleach. An airy 18th century house with not quite unripe banana green carpet, chandeliers every couple of steps, and sitting rooms, more sitting rooms than any other type of room. Then there's the Richie Rich, sort of half loft, half Chuck E. Cheese house with impractical walls and other people's kids. The house you like the most is the one that looks like ours, but the ceiling leaks and water bulges the walls out. Of course, it costs the most, but you have a plan. A plan. The Korean child who silently follows you has a tiny blade. She paints white and stamps across her top lip before leaving to avenge our lost dignity and who knows what else in her past. One of my stress dreams is houses where the water is leaking down the ceiling and into the walls. So that's definitely in there. This one's called Tarantino-esque societal underbelly soap opera. You accept the invitation to an abandoned storefront beneath high-rise apartments. The awning is white with a blue stripe. Inside, men mill about a dead body. Someone puts a gun to your face to explain no one is allowed to leave. It takes a long time to cut the skull off. They remove the brain, the arm, the legs. The lighting grows rusted and hazy. The theory is this: the more of you from different parts of life involved, the harder it will be for the police. You will each take a piece of this man with you. The man with the gun convinces you by firing a bullet through the eye of someone who was not yet convinced. As you all leave the building carrying your sack, a woman, the man's wife, wails like she knows exactly what each of you carries. The man was a doctor, important, famous. He owed people money. This is the impression that you were supposed to have. There is an impression that you were supposed to have longer to get away. In the airport, a woman leans over and tells you, you really should be running. They will pin this on whoever they catch, and everyone loves a good story about a teacher fucking up his life. It will be front page news. That one made me really anxious because obviously I'd like to not lose my job teaching. So yeah, I think these are a good choice for Halloween. There's lots of body parts and gore and things like that. This is called Surreal Japanese Mumblecore. And it has a made up thing that my brain invented called a trifinti. I don't know what it is. It's a weapon of sorts, but that's what it was called in my dream. So love is spooky. You're right. You're right. Watching a trifinti match, a man in a white shirt with the friendship logo impels his opponent, then winks at you. You turn to leave, but come back, and it's the same moment, except the man in the white shirt willingly jumps on his own trifinity, killing himself. Now you know this means you will have to die too. So you run. A large man with a red trifinity bursts out of a door in a long hallway with green walls, and you cut down a set of stairs. More people begin to chase you. They would like to kill you. It's a game show. It's televised. Your fear is everyone's fear. The building has turned into a corporate lounge/office area where people are more relaxed and make their own hours. There are others here who must die. You all sit on the couch and talk about the meaning of monogamy and trying to survive. That one took a weird turn in the dream. Yeah, I think if I had to pick favorites, these next two are my favorites that I'll read. Or next three, I think, are my favorites of the dreams. This one's called French New Wave Influenced Latin American Apocalyptic Love Story. And I think this is because I took a Spanish film class. Spanish/Latin American film class, because it counted for a Spanish credit, because I was trying to get a Spanish minor, and we didn't actually have to speak Spanish, which really helped me get that minor. So we just had to watch movies, so that's a great way to get the minor. French New Wave influenced Latin American apocalyptic love story. We have boxes of dead soldiers' belongings. In one, a copy of the Brothers Karamazov, another stuffed with letters and flowers. Our job is to bury the boxes because we can't bury the bodies. There are long scenes of us just being what we are. Humans digging up the earth, humans smoking hand-rolled cigarettes, humans fucking up and dropping the boxes off the back of the truck so we don't know which photograph goes with which box, who had a baby, and who had a girl they called baby. The drive back from the graves is through the mountains. The first bomb lands behind us deep in the valley. It could be the sun setting the way the light flares in the rearview mirror next to your smile. We think we can outrun them. What's foolish is the hope that each explosion will be the last. One hits the mountain and melts the car, and at first we don't understand that the car is melting into us, and we are melting too. And when I do, I see my lover and me. We are the handsomest we've ever been, lying together in a yellow tent. It's a dream. Another bomb above us rains down molten rock. See, he tells me, you didn't feel a thing. So this one's supposed to be a little bit lighter, a little bit funnier than the other ones. Probably also a little easier to understand. Thanks, Karen. Quirky family dramedy. Everyone likes a good quirky film. You work at a gas station and I live on the second floor. Your boyfriend grills the roller dogs, the cheese stuffed hot dogs, the tornadoes. I had to come downstairs for napkins. Our daughter had spilled ketchup on her leggings. You just open. The world needs its Funyuns and 5-hour energy drinks. They wonder why I stroll around in my underwear holding a child. I wonder if my dick looks small, which isn't as vain as it sounds if you recall the boyfriend near the rolling meat, the spinning brats, his bald head peeking around the grease-streaked plastic protective case. He's a useful type guy. He's a cool guy. I heard your dad say to him, "Hey fella," like it was a name tag he could reuse. This wasn't in the dream. It was at our daughter's 7th birthday party. Back upstairs in my dream apartment, I find a cabinet in an adjoining conference room that has a stack of brown napkins. So I really didn't need to go down to your gas station in the first place. It's a little bit of a abrupt ending. I think gas stations have a lot of fun words in them now that I've read that poem after a while. 5-hour energy drinks, Funyuns, tornadoes. PG-13 superhero movie. And then I'll read one more after that, just because it's the last poem in the book and it's about Abra. So PG-13 superhero movie. It's a normal enough day before the attack. I'm watching my daughter play with her friend Kennedy at school. I've got an important job, the kind where I get called away from what really matters to ride in the backseat of a car and talk on the phone and have 2 bodyguards with their stone faces on either side. And the music, layered on in editing, is full of bass before the bombs drop and the car flips and I'm thrown from it as buildings crumble and flames catch and light up everything. In the next shot, I'm broken on the ground like I've been burnt to ash, but for my head, and a bald man with light blue eyes in a suit shoots me to make sure I'm dead. But I'm not. The bullet fires back, yes, from my head, and knocks him flat, and I rise from the pile, naked but whole, glowing red. I'm the phoenix. Resurrecting is what I do. And that same energy I use for rebirth, I can channel into others, so I use it to break this man more. He doesn't stay broken. His bones, like centipede legs, ripple along under his skin. Other men who look just like him join him. I know now I must find my daughter, because what's the point of all this fake destruction if there's not anything so fragile it needs to be saved? All right, this is the last poem I'll read. It's also the last poem of the book. It's called Bone Brush. And it's not a dream poem. It's just about my daughter, Abra, sleeping. Bone brush, feathering away at the skin over your ribs while you sleep on top of me, still so small as to be barely here. Not like a house or a tree. Sometimes you hide, and the only way I can find you is your eventual desire to want to be found. I imagine I'm sweeping away even that to the small braid of your being. In you a meaning I'm eager to grasp for both our sakes, since you've been asking and telling me how afraid you are to die. I tell you what I've heard and what I hope is right, that you will live a long life and death will be careful with you, not painful, slowly eroding you, untying the bow that anchors you here, a slow drift across a sky you find friendly and expectant. Thank you all for listening to those poems. They by far are the weirdest, like just a whole string of weirdness there for you all. But I figured Halloween, I don't know if there's a better setting for all those poems to be read back to back to back, but thank you for listening to them.
Thank you so much, Chris. And now the floor is open for questions. If you guys have questions, unmute yourself and ask, but I'll start with the first one, and that is, are you still writing dream poems?
I'm not. No, not right now. I think thanks, Eric. I think I'm not dreaming as interestingly or as organized as I was at this time. So I'm still having dreams, which is good. But in a way, I'm kind of letting them just exist out inside my brain and churn in there. So no, the quick answer is no, not writing dream poems, just letting them be dreams for now until they present themselves. I mean, they kind of wrote themselves. So maybe I'm being lazy about it. Like, I mean, I had to transcribe them, but they felt organized already. So maybe I should go back to that as a practice. I don't know.
Well, out of curiosity, what is your writing process like in general? If there is an organized process to it, at least.
Well, I think I have periods of writing a lot and periods of writing not at all. I may have conditioned myself from Lexington Poetry Month to only write a lot, like certain times a year. So right now I'm not writing that much or at all. And then the poems will sit around for quite some time. and I'll read them over or remember one that I liked, like one that keeps coming back to my mind. And then I'll work on that one a little bit more. I'll move other ones that I don't quite like as much to piles where I won't spend much time or energy on them. And then eventually have a stack of poems that I like and start thinking about them as a collection, as something that works together. And I'll start seeing how they speak to one another, and what my brain was telling me I was thinking about that I didn't know I was thinking about. I think that's been an important part of my process with this book. And then I'll return to hopefully writing again at that point, writing a lot and generating like, oh, I've been thinking about this. Let me be more intentional about it. And yeah, just kind of that recursive process, I think, of writing a lot, not writing that much, looking at my poems, being worried about writing not writing that much, like maybe this is the end of the road for me, in terms of generating new work, and then eventually getting around to writing some more, and then looking at back what I've done already. That's pretty much it.
I have a question.
Yeah,
something you said earlier about one of your poems. You were describing something in the poem that maybe didn't make any sense, but you said that that's what it was in the poem, so you felt like you had to put it the way it was in the poem. And I've been writing dream poems too, and I also feel obligated to follow the dream without, even if it doesn't make sense. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, there's being faithful to the dream, but I think also being faithful to the emotion or feeling. I think it doesn't make sense, or it's a high likelihood that it doesn't make sense to the reader when I say that. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense to me. So I'm like, yeah, I know why all those people in that dream where they're sitting around on the couches talking about monogamy and trying to survive, because that's a hard thing about marriage sometimes, or at least when the marriage is breaking up and not going well, it's something you consider. But like in the context of a poem that's already weird with made up weapons and people running around the halls, it's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, that transition. And when I'm reading it after a while of not having read it, I'm like, I'm really grateful for my readers to stick with this poem once they get there, because I'm like, oh, that was probably a little jarring to them at that moment. And I also think that I owed the readers in this book poems around it that were pretty concrete and easy to see themselves in and the characters in, so that they could go to these places that maybe don't make 100% sense to them, but emotionally might echo or ring throughout the rest of the poems. So that's the way I ended up approaching them. And it was Katerina who encouraged me to include the dreams in the long run. It was one of the parts of the book that I felt most insecure about, and felt was one of the bigger risks of the collection, is including those poems. And knowing that people would read them and go, yeah, that made no sense whatsoever, but hopefully like over time they would remember a part or some of it and be like, whoa, it kind of does make sense in a weird way.
Made sense to me.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I just wanted to say that I really like the dreams. Really, to me, really brought the book together, because they were weird, but so many of the images and the emotions in the dreams, echoed throughout the collection, and it just really tied it together beautifully, I thought.
Oh, thank you. That's, as I said, I was insecure about it. So anytime anyone talks about the dream poems, I'm like, thank you. Thank you for hearing them and seeing them that way. That's great. Eric has a question here. This might seem obvious, but did you feel yourself needing to write this book as a form of therapy or pathway to heal? Like there wasn't a clear path forward without hammering these poems out? I definitely feel like the poems helped me heal. I don't know that I needed to write or publish them to complete the process. I felt like and there's more that, as you know, Eric, and well, probably most people here write poetry, so that's great. As you know, like not every poem is going to get published. And some of the poems that were most healing were probably the least publishable because they were painful to other people or not very good. And the goal of the book was to talk about publishing the book, writing the book, putting it together, I think was my hope that we could talk about this subject together, which is, I guess, what we're doing in a book club, but that people do get divorced at all ages and with kids or without kids involved. And it's not really talked about. Like, it's not something that you can bring up casually. People tiptoe around it. They're afraid to mention it. And there's just also a wild variety of emotions involved, especially the more people you add in, like kids, family, new boyfriends, new girlfriends. It just gets to be, I think, a pretty ripe area for poetry to enter and really talk about and provide the different angles and the different perspectives and the different emotions that poetry gives us access to. So definitely healed through the writing of the poems, and the book is, I think, as always, I like books, poems, stories that start conversations. So publishing is my way of saying I'm ready to have a conversation about this with other people.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you typically, and if you do, when do you share your work with other people and get feedback from them? Is that something you do often? Do you not,
Yeah, I think when I first started writing poetry, like I basically would just thrust it in front of anyone who wanted to read. Oh, you like poems? Cool, read these poems. And I think really what I was looking for there was just validation and affirmation that I had done a thing, and not really thinking about the quality of it. Really, as opposed to just like, yeah, this is a thing that I did. How cool is it? And then give it to someone to read. And then I think as I started to realize that, oh, this is going to be a major part of my life, I sought out people who had more knowledge than me, more skill than me, and that I wanted to learn from. And then I handed those poems over with a lot of insecurity and fear, and but also determination to get better. And so I would say that led me to meeting Katerina, and to I heard her poems at UK on the stage and was like, oh wow, okay, this is poetry. This is what I'm trying to do with my work, or at least get to the as close to that level as possible. And so reaching out to her and also taking classes where other people seem serious about the subject. And at this stage, I would say my sharing is pretty limited for this book, and several of you are here, which is amazing. I shared the final process and a lot of the individual poems that I would take my time with. And I also would send them out to see if other editors like them after reading them or after writing them and working on myself for a while. So I still feel like, although I haven't been as active, asking people to look over my work, that finding several peers that you respect, that you think will challenge you, and that have something to teach you is essential, no matter what stage you're in your writing. And I teach the gauntlet, and those poets, I share with those poets pretty frequently, even if we're not critiquing. So just the practice of sharing itself, I think, is useful for my ears. In reading these poems, I was like, I would write that poem differently now. and I don't know why that is. I don't feel like I don't like the way I wrote it here. By the way, I lost the cover to mine. That's why it's blue. But I was thinking like, oh, I've grown a little bit. I don't know if I've grown in a good way, but I know that I've grown because I would write that poem, that line, that phrase differently now. I feel like, so that was interesting while I was just reading those poems. So sometimes you answer questions and you have no idea if you actually answered the question, and that just happened right there. So if I didn't answer your question, Wendy, please ask it again.
What's an example of something like you were just saying, you just read it, but you thought, ooh, I would have changed this, or I would have moved that around, or what's a line that you read to us that you would change, and what would that sound like now?
Oh, well, I realized in the PG-13 superhero that I wrote a really, really long sentence, and then it ended like maybe the 4th or 5th paragraph down. And I was like, I don't know if I had the confidence in myself at the time, but I should have just wrote it as one long sentence the whole way. And like, I found myself in reading that poem, like using like the superhero, or like I imagined myself as the movie trailer person. And I was like, oh, okay. So, you know, I could do it differently. Like even this poem that ends up in this book, you could do differently. I still like it the way it is and love it, in fact, but yeah, I think there's like new avenues when you're just, even if you're just sharing your work, to share it because it's published, like you're learning about yourself and your work. So that's the opportunity is there.
I have a question. I wondered, why do you think you didn't dream for 4 years? Were you grieving, or were you doing okay during that time?
Yeah, so she was born, and then I also started my first year of teaching, and at the same time. So it was like she was born, and then 3 days later, I was at my first full day of training for Fayette County Public Schools. I would say, and this I know is also a time where I have to recognize her mom, that was the best year of sleep in my life. But I also started to recognize that I wasn't dreaming. I would come home from work, play with Abra, and basically go to bed at 8 o'clock, and just so I could get up and go to work. And I just slept like a rock till 5 in the morning, and then would get up, go early into work, lesson plan for my 3 classes, like try to do a good job teaching, try to be, and I think something about that, like it's not survival mode. It was just like, he's got enough going on. Shut down the dreams for a while. Like nothing at night. So I just like slept like a rock. And so,
Chris,
yeah.
what was your writing then? How did you write during those 4 years? What was your creative life like?
I know that I was writing, I know what I was writing, because I remember when I wrote, and you've read these poems that they've never, some of them have been published, but they won't be published together ever, probably. Some things you just abandon. But they were like this Posable Man series, and it was a poem where I was like, oh, this is a true, real poem. It like gave me a lot of energy at the start of, it was during that first year. I remember where I was sitting when I wrote the poems and started that series of poems. And so I felt like I got a big push of energy like the first couple of years. And then it's kind of a blur, or the first year, but then it's kind of a blur. I think I was taking a lot of classes in the meantime. And I started Breadloaf School of English in that summer, and took their poetry classes and participated in their writing community. So I was writing pretty consistently for the first 4 or 5 years of Abra's life. I wrote a short story collection that I would like to look at again, and a novella that I would like to look at again, and I was just trying to put myself in a lot of spaces where writing was happening. And I will be honest with this group, my marriage obviously suffered for that, because I was not present as much as a person should be when they agree to or pursue a marriage with someone. So yeah, I wrote a lot, but was not very present.
Chris, I wondered if you'd talk about sequencing the poems in your book. There's several series of poems that are kind of interdispersed. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think up until the last moment, I was rearranging the dreams because Dan can probably attest to this. I like sent an email in the 11th hour. It was like, this poem has to be moved forward and this poem needs to be moved back. And by the way, here's a brand new poem that I forgot to include that I wanted to include. And it goes at towards the end. And I had arranged it multiple times. And I think when I gave it to Katerina to read after she asked for it, she gave it back to me and was like, yeah, you're going to rearrange this again and again and again. And it was great advice because I honestly struggled with it. And I chose not to do sections. I didn't want to do sections that read it in one sitting was kind of playing in my mind. I wanted someone not to have an excuse to put it down. And the method I ended up using to think about the sequencing was kind of like a dreamscape, like an emotional landscape, like a psychological landscape. So if I felt this is a kind of a metaphor that's just coming to me now, but if you're been hiking for a long time and you don't see a view that if you don't come to a spot where you're looking out over all the mountains, and then it seems like a pretty lame hike. Or if you don't come to a creek, if something to break up the monotony. So if I ever felt like we were in one emotion for too long, or we hadn't been shooken up a little bit, then I tried to jut something in there to make us transition essentially, or stop and pause for a moment. And I do think that I wanted to take us through not necessarily a true chronology, but kind of a looping kind of motion throughout, good moments, bad moments, hard moments, good moments, just all the way throughout, so that it's not so linear, there was a marriage and now there's not a marriage. And I think the daughter poems kind of help with that, because it's more about there was a union that involved love, and that love is changing, and another love is existing and growing at the same time. So not a concrete answer, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What feedback have you received so far?
Mostly good things, thankfully. A lot of people have reached out about, a handful of people have reached out about the Abra poems, the poems that are about Abra, just talking about, I have a lot of people say she's lucky to have me. I'm like, well, I'm lucky to have her. Those type of things. I know people are very nice when you publish a book and put yourself out there. So that's mostly what it's been like. And I've just been super grateful to have anyone read it and tell me that they've read it and what they think about it. I put postcards out at my reading, and I've gotten several back from people with poems they like and enjoy. So that's nice. And some cryptic messages. I shared this at the Kentucky State Poetry Society. The one that is most enigmatic to me is it's just a postcard, and it's not labeled. It just says missing love, or making love is the thing I miss the most. And so I feel like that's been one of the feedbacks, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that is a thing. So that type of feedback I feel has been enjoyable, because it's someone clearly responding pretty deeply to the poems. So if you have criticisms, I'd love to hear them too, because I'm trying to still write and become a better writer. So if you read it, you're like, well, next time you didn't really accomplish this all that well. This is for all you all, as well as Katerina. She would tell me anyway. But you can also say what you didn't like, because I like to hear that as well.
So you always seem so emotionally vulnerable in the writings that you've done. And this goes back years to Slade as well. Was that something that has always been present in your writing, or was that something that kind of developed over time? Or do you struggle to put that through in your writing, or does that just kind of come naturally? Or how does that work for you?
That's a really good question. I would say it didn't come naturally. I think I would hate for someone to show them to me, but the poems I was writing at first were pretty performative and like not really emotionally engaged. I don't know how to describe it. Not really about me, is the way it feels. And then this is why like Katerina's reading that like kind of changed the way I thought about poetry was most important, because they did feel like emotionally vulnerable and real and about real people and real things. And so I've worked at it. I know I've worked at it. I can't pinpoint the moment where, but even now, in thinking about like picking up my notebook and my pen and writing, I'm most critical of the thoughts that don't seem vulnerable, because they're not going to come across the page to the reader in a way that they can connect to. I think also just being honest and being willing to go where most people are uncomfortable creates a sense of vulnerability. And I think you can. I honestly think you can hide behind that too, like be overly vulnerable, and to the point to making people uncomfortable. And so that's an interesting thing that I've been thinking about recently with my poetry too. So I think it's a balance. And I think the dream poems actually work to reduce vulnerability a little bit, to make it a little less personal. So I think that they do a little double duty there. I don't know. How do we feel about vulnerability? Like, it's definitely like poetry is a space for it. But if I just like ran into like a friend and started talking to them about all my emotions related to raising a daughter and divorce, like they'd be like, cool, good to see you later. You know, it'd be an overshare situation. So I think poetry feels like a good space for it.
Well, I have a question for you.
Please, Mary.
Well, part of it is I have loved this book, and the poems about divorce I connect with because it helps me remember and heal from that, even though it was a long time ago, those feelings when you say, yeah, I've been there. And so that's what I love about them, is your openness and the way you help other people understand those emotions. But I think my favorite ones, of course, are about Abra, and how now she must be growing up, and I haven't seen her in a while. So I guess my question for you is, as you heal from divorce and Abra grows, what are you writing now about her and your emotions about her growing up and you being a dad to this growing up little girl who that you love very much, which is so obvious by what you write. So what are you doing right now about Abra, more Abra poems?
Well, the exciting thing is Abra's writing her own poems. So I get to back off a little and be like, all right, well, you can write about your life now. But I did write one recently, maybe a couple months ago, that was called Heartbreaker, because she is definitely getting into that realm of existence as a 9-year-old. She's had 2 boyfriends already since the start of the school year. broke up with one. I don't know, the other one, I don't know if it was official or not, but, and I don't remember the whole poem, but I know it's called Heartbreaker. And the first line is, she's got a big girl bed. And it's just kind of like, you know, just thinking about like, she's about to start all the drama, all the things. And yeah, I don't know exactly what's going to come out, but I know I'm going to start, I think, if I don't know, it's hard because now she's coming her own person. I want her to tell her own story. I don't want to be writing her story and in that way. So I haven't been writing as much about her, but I obviously have not stopped thinking about her and for her and all those things. So yeah.
So my question is very broad. It's about the title, because I know you had a long list of titles that you were pondering. So why Open Burning? How did that one stick?
It was editor approved. That's one. So that's another thing Katerina asked me to do, and I think it's a good practice to make a long list of titles from the book, and she helped with the like come up with a couple of options, and then I combed the book, and then, you know, asked trusted peers and things, and I can't even remember the other ones, so that's probably a good sign for this one. And I think it's one that captures kind of that public. I mean, you remember, you can pretty clearly visualize when you see something burning out on a horizon and like see the smoke and all that stuff. So it felt like being someone who is slightly in the public eye, even as a teacher, as a poet, like who's experiencing a hardship, something very public like a divorce, like it kind of feels like you're walking around like just on fire. Like people are looking at you, people are curious about it, but don't want to go near it too much, don't know what to say. And then there is a poem in there called Open Burning. So it, you know, it feels like, and it's a poem about considering what love could look like at the end of the world, which now after a pandemic feels more appropriate. And it talks about, you know, tossing your body into a burn barrel. Like eventually that's the way you move through a divorce. It feels like eventually you're just like, all right, I bought this thing, it's got memories, we're tossing it. Like it doesn't exist here anymore, and you're not burning it. Maybe you are, but most of my stuff ended up just in a trash can, which isn't very poetic. I mean, it's kind of poetic, but not as poetic as a burn barrel where you're just tossing things in that need to go up in smoke. So thematically it fit. I don't remember the other ones, and Katerina approved it, so it became the title. And we just happened upon a cover that I think fits perfectly with that title. And so when you are making the right choices, the universe conspires to support you. So I think it worked out perfectly that way.
One more thing about universe conspiring is that this book actually had an actual physical event, and that was the last day before the whole Kentucky shut down. And I'm so glad, Chris, that you did go ahead. I wasn't going to suggest either way, you know, and it was your decision, and it was the right decision.
Yeah, I'm really glad I got the chance to share the book too. And also really glad that no one got sick, but I was really nervous about it. I think as we all were in March. And I can't wait until we get to come back together and do poetry events in real life too. I don't know when it's going to be, but after tonight, I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Chris, for reading and for answering questions. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for honoring Chris and his book. Congratulations, Chris again, and thank you all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Bye.